And so, esteemed scholars, we arrive at the most fascinating and terrifying subject in our xenobiology curriculum, Class 12 Deathworld Species. Professor Zixtal clicked his mandibles with theatrical emphasis, his iridescent carapace gleaming under the amphitheater's lights. The classroom of 60-odd students from across the Galactic Confederation fell silent. Even the usual whispers from the Vapori students, who communicated primarily through controlled release of aromatic compounds, ceased entirely. Today, the professor continued, manipulating the holographic display with his primary manipulators. We discuss the apex predator of all known sentient species. The display flickered, then resolved into a familiar bipedal form: humans. Tucked away in the back row of the amphitheater, Alex Bennett fought the urge to sink lower in his seat. Instead, he maintained his carefully practiced posture, not too rigid, not too relaxed, and kept his expression neutral. 3 years at the Galactic Confederation Academy had taught him how to blend in, though blending in when you're the only human in a school of 12,000 alien students was relative at best. Notice the deceptively simple body structure, Professor Zixtal continued, using a laser pointer to highlight different parts of the hologram. Don't let this fool you. These creatures evolved on a planet with 1.1 standard gravity, atmospheric oxygen levels of 21%, and temperature variations that would kill most sentient species within hours. Their homeworld, designated Terra, or Earth in their dominant language, experiences everything from devastating tectonic events to atmospheric maelstroms that can level entire settlements. A Merskian student near the front raised one of her tentacles. Professor, I heard they can survive having parts of their body removed. Is that actually true? Alex suppressed a smile. This ought to be good. Excellent question! Professor Zixtal's mandibles clicked rapidly in excitement. Humans possess remarkable regenerative capabilities. They can lose significant portions of their external appendages and survive. Their bodies will seal the wounds through a process they call scabbing, and their internal repair mechanisms can even regrow certain tissues. There are documented cases of humans losing up to 60% of their liver, a crucial internal organ, and regenerating it completely. A wave of uncomfortable chittering swept through the classroom. Alex casually pulled out his tablet and made a show of taking notes, though he'd heard all of this before. Being the only human at the academy meant he'd gotten used to being the subject of xenobiology lectures without the lecturers realizing it. But the physical adaptations, the professor continued, pale in comparison to their psychological traits. Humans are, to put it simply, cognitively aberrant by Confederation standards. The hologram shifted to show a human brain, rotating slowly. They are predators with prey instincts, communal beings with fiercely individual drives, and perhaps most disturbingly, they can form emotional attachments to virtually anything, even inanimate objects or theoretical concepts. They will fight to the death for ideas. A Trelkin student in the front row, a methane breather inside an environmental suit, raised a manipulator. Is it true they purposely consume toxins for pleasure? Professor Zixtal's compound eyes gleamed. Indeed. They voluntarily ingest substances that damage their neural pathways, cardiovascular systems, and internal organs, for recreational purposes. They call it drinking or smoking. Some humans even consume capsaicin, a chemical compound plants on their world evolved specifically to prevent being eaten. The class erupted in a mixture of horrified gasps and fascinated murmurs. Alex bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. If they were this shocked about alcohol and cigarettes, wait until someone told them about extreme sports. But perhaps their most terrifying characteristic, the professor said, lowering his voice dramatically, is their response to threats. When confronted with danger, humans don't just experience fear, they become energized by it. Their bodies flood with adrenaline and cortisol, temporarily enhancing their strength, speed, and pain tolerance. In crisis situations, documented cases exist of humans lifting objects 4 times their body weight, continuing to fight with multiple severe injuries, or remaining conscious despite blood loss that would kill any reasonable species. A holographic video began playing, showing historical footage of human emergency responders running into burning buildings, soldiers throwing themselves on explosives to save comrades, and civilians forming human chains to rescue strangers from natural disasters. They call this heroism, Professor Zixtal explained. We would call it insanity. Alex felt a strange mix of pride and embarrassment. Sure, humans did some pretty badass things, but having your species discussed like some kind of terrifying space monster was weird. He glanced at Krillax beside him, a 6-limbed Ventarii with translucent skin through which you could see his 3 hearts beating. Krillax was his roommate and probably the closest thing Alex had to a friend at the academy. Krillax knew Alex was human. It was impossible to hide something like that from a roommate, but had agreed to keep it quiet. Professor Zixtal clicked a button, and the hologram shifted to display a human skeleton. Note the dense bone structure, designed to withstand constant impacts. Humans evolved as persistence predators. They would literally chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their bipedal locomotion is remarkably efficient, and their thermoregulatory system, sweating, allows them to shed excess heat while continuing to move. Some humans can run for over 100 kilometers without stopping. Alex noticed several students eyeing the exits, as if calculating escape routes. He suppressed another smile. "Professor!" called out a Juranian student, their crystalline form refracting light as they moved. "Given these adaptations, why aren't humans the dominant species in the Confederation? Why have we only encountered a handful of their exploratory vessels?" The professor's mandibles clicked in what Alex recognized as the equivalent of a smug smile. "An excellent question with a simple answer. They've only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their technological development has been uneven. They created nuclear weapons before they eliminated poverty on their planet. They walked on their moon before they resolved gender equality issues. They are in many ways brilliant savages." Alex felt his face grow warm. That was a bit unfair. Sure, humanity had its problems, but... Additionally, the professor continued, the Confederation's Security Council has designated humans as a Class 12 restricted species. Contact is limited to diplomatic and scientific personnel. The risk of cultural contamination, in both directions, is deemed too high. The display shifted again, showing a map of Confederation space with Earth marked in red, surrounded by a buffer zone. The human homeworld is under observation but not directly engaged with. The handful of humans allowed to travel within Confederation space must undergo extensive psychological evaluation and behavioral modification. Even then, they are restricted to diplomatic compounds and research stations. Alex kept his expression carefully neutral. This, at least, he knew was complete nonsense. He was living proof that humans were allowed at the Academy, though, admittedly, he was the only one. His acceptance had been part of a pilot program, a gesture of goodwill from the Confederation Security Council. What the professor didn't know, what almost no one at the Academy knew, was that humans weren't nearly as restricted as official Confederation policy claimed. "For your assignment," Professor Zixtal said, "you will each prepare a risk assessment report on human integration into Confederation society. Consider psychological, biological, and sociological factors. What safeguards would be necessary? What benefits might humans bring? What dangers must be mitigated?" The bell equivalent sounded, a pleasant harmonic tone that signaled the end of the lecture. Students began gathering their materials, the air filled with the various sounds of dozens of different species discussing the terrifying Deathworlders they'd just learned about. "Remember," the professor called out as students filed toward the exits, "your reports are due in one standard week. And please keep your speculation within scientific parameters. I don't want another humans might be hiding among us conspiracy theory like last semester." Several students laughed nervously. Alex kept his head down as he packed up his tablet, waiting for the initial rush to clear before making his way to the exit. "Fascinating lecture, wasn't it?" Krillax said quietly as they walked together into the hallway. "Oh, absolutely riveting," Alex replied dryly. "I particularly enjoyed learning that I'm a brilliant savage with aberrant psychology." Krillax's translucent skin flushed slightly blue, his species equivalent of laughter. "To be fair, you did eat that pepperoni pizza last week. I thought the food synthesizer had malfunctioned and created poison. It's called flavor, Krillax, something your algae smoothies desperately lack. My nutritional supplements are perfectly balanced for optimal physiological function." Krillax sniffed, his respiratory slits flaring slightly. "Yeah, and they taste like what I imagine the bottom of the Academy pool tastes like." "You're proving the professor's point about humans and toxins, you know." Alex grinned. "Maybe, but at least I'm having fun while I'm at it." They made their way through the crowded hallways of the Academy, a marvel of xeno-architectural design that accommodated species from methane breathers to silicon-based lifeforms. The main concourse soared 15 stories high, with anti-gravity lifts, ramps, tunnels, and in one section, a viscous fluid channel for the amorphous species that preferred to flow rather than walk. Alex had grown accustomed to the diversity, but he never stopped appreciating it. Earth's attempts at multiculturalism had nothing on a place where the definition of culture expanded to include beings with fundamentally different biology, perception, and cognition. "Are you going to the Harmony Gathering tonight?" Krillax asked as they approached the dormitory junction. "The what now?" "The Harmony Gathering. It's the pre-examination relaxation ritual. Most final-year students attend. Alex vaguely remembered seeing something about it on the Academy's notification system. Is that the thing where everyone tries to achieve some kind of collective consciousness through that weird humming? It's a telepathic resonance exercise, Krillax corrected primly. And it's not weird. It's a centuries-old tradition that helps align cognitive functions before major academic challenges. Right, and for those of us who aren't telepathic, there are adaptive interfaces. Besides, it's not just about the resonance exercise. There's also a reception afterward. Food, drinks, even some compatible with human physiology. Alex considered it. His usual routine was to study alone in his room, occasionally venturing out to the mostly empty gym facilities during off hours. He'd gotten used to the solitude, but sometimes... I'll think about it, he said finally. Good, because I already put your name on the attendance list, Krillax said, his heart's visibly beating faster through his translucent chest, and I may have mentioned to Devora that you'd be there. Alex stopped walking. You did what? Devora Xantier was a Silurian third year with iridescent scales and the most captivating compound eyes Alex had ever seen. They'd spoken exactly twice, once when she'd asked him to pass a molecular analyzer in xenochemistry lab, and once when he'd accidentally bumped into her in the library and managed to stammer out an apology before fleeing in embarrassment. She asked if you were attending, Krillax said innocently. What was I supposed to say? The truth that you didn't know? That your human roommate is a socially awkward mess who breaks out in hives at the thought of small talk? She seemed disappointed when she thought you might not be there. Alex narrowed his eyes. You're making that up. Am I? Krillax's respiratory slits fluttered in amusement. Guess you'll have to attend to find out. Before Alex could respond, a commotion erupted from the central atrium. Raised voices, some electronic, some harmonic, some beyond human hearing range, but generating enough vibration to be felt, echoed through the halls. What's going on? Alex asked, momentarily distracted from his roommate's meddling. Krillax extended his neck, using his height advantage to peer over the crowd. Some kind of demonstration. Look. Alex followed his roommate's gaze. In the center of the atrium, a group of students had unfurled a holographic banner that floated in midair, text scrolling in multiple languages. The standard galactic translation read, "No more Deathworlders. Security, not diversity." Oh, Alex said quietly. That's new. It wasn't the first anti-human sentiment he'd encountered at the Academy, but it was certainly the most public. Usually it came in the form of whispers when he walked by, species suddenly finding reasons to leave when he entered a room, or the occasional anonymous message on his tablet suggesting he returned to his savage planet. They're just idiots, Krillax said firmly. Ignore them, easy for him to say. Alex watched as a small crowd gathered around the demonstrators. Most students seemed merely curious, but some were nodding in agreement. A tall, mantis-like Threki stepped forward, voice amplifier in hand. The Confederation was founded on principles of peace and harmony. Introducing predator species disrupts the balance we've maintained for millennia. Humans are unpredictable, violent, and physiologically designed for killing. A chorus of agreement rose from some in the crowd. Did you know, the Threki continued, that humans have fought more wars against their own species than all Confederation conflicts combined? Their history is written in blood. So is everyone's history if you go back far enough, Alex muttered. What we're asking is simple, the Threki said. Reverse the integration initiative. Return to the containment policy. Keep Deathworlders where they belong, on Deathworlds. More cheers, louder this time. Should we go? Krillax asked quietly. Alex was about to agree when a new voice cut through the noise. And what exactly gives you the right to decide who belongs where? The crowd parted to reveal Devora Xantier, her scales shifting from their usual blue-green to a deep indigo, a sign of anger in Silurians. Last I checked, she continued, the Confederation Charter guarantees equal treatment to all sentient species, regardless of evolutionary origin. The Threki demonstrator clicked his mandibles dismissively. The Charter was written before we encountered truly dangerous species. Exceptions must be made for public safety. Public safety? Devora laughed, a melodic sound despite her obvious anger. Have there been any incidents involving humans at this academy? Any at all? The crowd murmured. Alex felt suddenly exposed, though he was still partially hidden behind taller students. It's only a matter of time, the Threki insisted. You've seen the data. They're literally designed by evolution to kill. So are Ventraxians, but I don't see you protesting Ambassador Kavex's visit next week, Devora countered. Face it, this isn't about safety. It's about fear. And ignorance. The Threki's compound eyes flashed. You're naive, Silurian. Perhaps on your homeworld, with its carefully controlled ecosystems, you can afford such idealism. Some of us come from worlds that have suffered invasive species before. Comparing sentient beings to invasive species is exactly the kind of rhetoric the Confederation was formed to overcome, Devora said sharply. Or did you sleep through historical ethics? A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. The Threki's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. This discussion is pointless, he said finally. The Integration Initiative is coming up for review before the Security Council next month. We'll see then which way the political winds are blowing. He gestured to his fellow demonstrators, and they began packing up their holographic displays. Well, that was unexpected, Krillax murmured as the crowd began to disperse. Alex was still staring at Devora, who was now being congratulated by several students. Yeah, he managed. Unexpected. Still thinking of skipping the Harmony gathering? Krillax asked slyly. Alex shot him a look. Shut up. I'll take that as a no. The Harmony Hall was one of the Academy's most impressive architectural achievements. A massive geodesic dome with walls that shifted between transparent and opaque, depending on the needs of those inside. Tonight, they were set to a translucent crystal, allowing the light from the binary star system to filter through in prismatic patterns that danced across the floor. Alex tugged uncomfortably at the collar of his formal Academy uniform, a sleek, adaptive material that adjusted to the wearer's physiology. On him, it looked reasonably human standard, though the iridescent sheen marked it as Confederation-made. Stop fidgeting, Krillax said. You look fine. Easy for you to say. Your skin is your clothes. My dermal layer is not clothes, Krillax replied indignantly. It's a sophisticated semi-permeable membrane that regulates... Yeah, I've heard the lecture. Alex took a deep breath. Remind me again why I let you talk me into this. Before Krillax could answer, a melodic voice spoke from behind them. Probably because he told you I asked about you. Alex turned to find Devora standing there, her scales shimmering in a pattern he'd never seen before. A rippling wave of blue-green with flecks of gold that seemed to follow the prismatic light. Oh, hi, he managed, suddenly aware that he had absolutely no idea what to do with his hands. What you did earlier in the atrium was really, cool. Smooth, Bennett. Real smooth. Devora's inner eyelids flickered in what Alex had learned was a Silurian smile. Thank you. Though I didn't do it to be cool. That kind of ignorance needs to be challenged. Absolutely, Alex agreed quickly. I just meant, it was brave. Speaking of which, Krillax interjected, subtly extending a limb to nudge Alex. Didn't you have something you wanted to discuss with Devora? About your xenobiology assignment? I did? Alex blinked, then caught on. Oh, right. The, assignment about humans. Devora tilted her head. Professor Zixtal's class? I'm not in that one, but I did take it last year. Find it interesting? Something about her tone made Alex suspect she might know more than she was letting on. He glanced at Krillax, who had developed a sudden intense interest in the ceiling architecture. It's educational, Alex said carefully, though not entirely accurate. Oh? Devora's compound eyes focused on him with interest. How so? Well, for instance, the professor seems to think humans are restricted to diplomatic compounds and research stations. But here I am at the Academy. There was a moment of silence as Devora processed this. Then her scales shifted to that deep indigo he'd seen earlier. Are you saying what I think you're saying? She asked quietly. Alex nodded. Surprise. You defended a Deathworlder to a crowd of protesters today. Devora stared at him for a long moment, her compound eyes unreadable. Then to his surprise, her scales rippled with bands of bright yellow, Silurian laughter. That explains so much, she said. The way you always use the environmental controls in the library to make it warmer. How you're the only student who uses the high-gravity gym. Why you actually eat the food in the cafeteria instead of just absorbing nutrient solutions. You noticed all that? Her scales flickered with hints of purple, embarrassment. I may have been paying attention. Krillax made a sound suspiciously like a cough. I just remembered I promised to help Tazal with their molecular harmonics project. Terribly important. Can't miss it. You two enjoy the gathering. Before Alex could protest, his roommate had slipped away into the crowd, leaving him alone with Devora. Your friend isn't subtle, she observed. No, Alex agreed. Subtlety isn't really possible when your emotions are visible through your skin. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. So, Devora said finally, human, that's unexpected. Good unexpected, or I'm mentally calculating the nearest exit unexpected. Her scales rippled with yellow again. Definitely the first one, though I have questions. He's violated his restricted status by attending this gathering. The lead security officer, distinguished by additional insignia on his uniform, approached them. His face was impassive, mandibles perfectly still in the draconian expression of official authority. "Student Alex Bennett?" the officer asked, his translator rendering his clicks and hisses into standard Galactic. Alex stood slowly. "Yes, that's me. You are in violation of Security Directive 1138, restricting Class 12 species from participating in telepathic resonance events without proper authorization. Please come with us." "He wasn't even participating in the resonance," Devora protested, rising beside him. "He was sitting here the whole time." "Proximity is sufficient for violation," the Trekkie said smugly. "Humans emit unregulated neural patterns that can disrupt the harmonic field." "That's ridiculous," Devora said. "There's no scientific evidence for that claim." The security officer held up a hand to silence them both. "The directive is clear. Student Bennett must come with us for processing. The Academic Council will determine if further action is warranted." Alex felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. The same one he'd felt when he'd first arrived at the academy, and realized just how alone he was going to be. But he kept his expression neutral, knowing that any display of emotion would only reinforce the stereotypes. "It's fine," he said to Devora. "I'll sort this out." "This is about the demonstration earlier," Devora said, her scales now a deep, angry indigo. "He's targeting you because I embarrassed him." The Threkkie's mandibles clicked rapidly. "I am merely concerned with Academy security. The directive exists for a reason." "Of course you are," Devora replied sarcastically. "Just like your protest was about public safety and not plain old xenophobia." "That's enough," the security officer said firmly. "Student Xantir, this is an official matter. Interference will be noted in your academic record." Devora looked like she wanted to argue further, but Alex shook his head slightly. He'd been at the academy long enough to know when to pick his battles. "I'll go with you," he told the officer. "But I want it on record that I was not participating in the resonance exercise." The officer nodded curtly. "Noted. This way, please." As Alex was escorted from the Harmony Hall, he glanced back to see Devora watching him, her scales now a troubled mixture of colors he couldn't quite interpret. Around her, students were whispering, many looking at him with new understanding, and in some cases fear, as they realized what he was. So much for blending in, he thought. The Academic Council chamber was designed, like most spaces in the Academy, to accommodate a wide variety of species. It featured a circular arrangement of platforms at varying heights and environmental conditions, surrounding a central speaking area where the subject of discussion would stand. Alex stood in that center now, feeling uncomfortably like a specimen under observation, which, he supposed, he essentially was. The council consisted of 7 senior professors, representing the major biological classifications in the Confederation. Professor Zixtal was among them, looking distinctly uncomfortable as he avoided meeting Alex's gaze. "Student Bennett," began the council head, a Quarian elder whose translucent, jellyfish-like body pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns. "You understand why you've been brought before us?" "I'm told I violated Security Directive 1138, Alex replied evenly, "though I was not actually participating in the telepathic resonance exercise." "The directive specifies proximity, not participation," said another council member. A silicon-based lifeform whose crystalline structure refracted light in complex patterns. "With respect," Alex said, "I've attended academy functions for 3 years without incident. This is the first time this particular directive has been enforced against me." The council members exchanged glances, or their species equivalent of glances. "The complaint was only brought to our attention today," the Quarian elder said, "by a student who earlier led an anti-human demonstration," Alex pointed out. "This isn't about security, it's harassment." A murmur ran through the council. Professor Zixtal finally spoke up. "Student Bennett has maintained an exemplary academic record," he said. "There have been no prior incidents or concerns regarding his presence at academy functions." "Nevertheless," said the silicon being, "the directive exists for a reason. Humans are classified as a restricted species due to their unpredictable neural patterns and documented aggressive tendencies." Alex took a deep breath, weighing his options. He could continue arguing the technicalities, but that would only reinforce the image of the argumentative, confrontational human. Instead, he decided on a different approach. "Council members," he said, keeping his voice calm and measured. "I came to the Academy as part of the Integration Initiative, a program you all voted to support. The purpose was to test whether humans could successfully integrate into Confederation society." He paused, looking at each council member in turn. "For 3 years, I've attended classes, lived in standard dormitories, used common facilities, and participated in academy life without incident. If the Council now believes that my mere presence at a social gathering constitutes a security risk, then I have to question whether the integration initiative was ever given a fair chance to succeed. The Council chamber fell silent. Even the ambient sounds of the various environmental systems seemed to quiet. Student Bennett raises a valid point, the Corian elder said finally. The integration initiative was implemented with the understanding that certain allowances would be made. Rigid enforcement of pre-initiative directives undermines the program's purpose. Are we to ignore security protocols entirely? The Silicon being asked. Not ignore, Professor Zixtal said, but perhaps reinterpret in light of new information. Student Bennett's presence has provided valuable data on human behavior in non-human environments. Data that contradicts many of our preconceptions. Alex tried not to show his surprise at the professor's support. This was the same being who, just hours earlier, had described humans as brilliant savages. The Council head's bioluminescent patterns shifted in what Alex recognized as thoughtful consideration. Student Bennett, the Corian said, would you be willing to undergo neural pattern monitoring during future telepathic events? This would provide empirical data on whether human brain activity actually disrupts harmonic fields. I would, Alex agreed immediately. And I'd suggest expanding the study to include other non-telepathic species for comparison. Another murmur ran through the Council, this one distinctly more positive. A scientific approach, the Silicon being acknowledged. Acceptable. Then it is decided, the Council head declared. The complaint is dismissed, and Student Bennett is cleared to return to normal academy activities. However, we will implement neural monitoring protocols for the suggested study. Relief washed over Alex. It wasn't a complete victory. The underlying prejudice remained, but it was progress. Thank you, Council members, he said, inclining his head respectfully. As the Council session concluded and Alex was free to go, Professor Zixtal approached him in the antechamber. Student Bennett, the professor said, mandibles clicking nervously. A moment of your time. Alex nodded warily. Professor. I owe you an apology, Zixtal said, surprising him. My lecture today was less nuanced than it should have been. I relied too heavily on historical data and not enough on current observations. Like the observation that there's been a human in your class all semester? Alex couldn't resist asking. The professor's compound eyes widened. You're in my xenobiology class? But I don't... Back row, I keep quiet. Zixtal's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. This is highly embarrassing. If it helps, most of what you said was technically accurate. We did evolve as persistence predators. We do consume capsaicin for pleasure. We are pretty good at regenerating compared to some species. You just overemphasize certain aspects. Even so, the professor said, I've done you and your species a disservice. The purpose of xenobiology is to foster understanding, not perpetuate stereotypes. Alex shrugged. Look, I get it. Humans are weird by Confederation standards. We're contradictory and complex. It's easier to focus on the dramatic stuff. The adrenaline and the danger response. Makes for a more interesting lecture, but not a more accurate one, Zixtal insisted. I'd like to correct the record, as it were. Would you be willing to assist me in preparing a more balanced presentation on humans for future classes? Alex raised an eyebrow. You want me to help you teach about humans? Who better? Your perspective would be invaluable. I'll think about it, Alex said, surprised by the offer. But right now I should probably get back to my dormitory. It's been a long day. Of course, of course. The professor stepped aside. And Student Bennett? Thank you for your patience with us. Adaptation is challenging for some species. Alex nodded and headed out, mind racing. Between the demonstration, the Harmony gathering, his conversation with Devora, and now this council hearing, it had indeed been a very long day. And something told him it was about to get longer. Sure enough, as he approached the dormitory junction, he found Devora waiting for him, her scales a turbulent mix of colors. Hey, he said, suddenly feeling awkward again. Sorry about all that. You're apologizing? Devora's scales shifted to a surprised yellow-green. For what? The disruption. The drama. Not exactly how I planned to spend the evening. None of that was your fault. Her colors stabilized to a determined blue. What happened with the council? Complaint dismissed. I'm cleared to return to normal academy activities, whatever that means. Alex leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling very tired. Though I doubt things will be normal again. Not now that everyone knows what I am. Is that such a bad thing? Devora asked. Being known for who you really are? You saw how people looked at me when the security officers came. Like I was suddenly dangerous. 3 years of being just another student, gone in an instant. Devora moved closer, her compound eyes fixed on his. Maybe, or maybe this is an opportunity. For what? For people to see that the stories they've heard about humans don't match the reality. That you're not just some Deathworld monster, you're a person. Complex, contradictory, occasionally confusing, but a person. Despite his fatigue, Alex smiled. Occasionally confusing, huh? Frequently confusing, Devora amended, her scales rippling with amusement. But interesting. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the dormitory entrance. A group of students was emerging, led by the now familiar Threcky demonstrator. They were carrying equipment cases and what looked like scanning devices. What now? Alex muttered. The Threcky spotted them and changed course, heading directly toward them. His mandibles were set in what Alex recognized as a smug expression. Bennett, the Threcky said as he approached. I'm glad we found you. Can't say the feeling's mutual, Alex replied. What do you want, Vexkin? The council may have dismissed the specific complaint about the Harmony Gathering, but they've authorized a broader study of human neural patterns. Vexkin gestured to the equipment his group was carrying. We're the Xenoneurology Club. We've been tasked with setting up the monitoring equipment. Devora's scales darkened. Right now? Without any notice? The authorization just came through, Vexkin said, and monitoring should begin as soon as possible, for security. Alex eyed the equipment skeptically. That's a lot of gear for basic neural monitoring. Human brains are complex, Vexkin replied. We need to track multiple parameters. Something felt off about the whole situation. The council had only just made their decision, and yet this group was already fully equipped and ready to go? And since when did student clubs handle security protocols? I'd like to see the council authorization, Alex said. Vexkin's mandibles twitched in irritation. It's been properly filed with Academy security. Now, if you'll just come with us to the lab. No, Alex said firmly. The council said monitoring during telepathic events, not continuous surveillance. Interpretation of the council's directive falls to the implementing body, Vexkin said smoothly. In this case, the Xenoneurology Club, under my supervision. Devora stepped forward. This is harassment, Vexkin. Your anti-human agenda is showing. This is science, Vexkin insisted. The kind of rigorous observation that should have been done before allowing Deathworlders into the Academy in the first place. Alex was about to respond when a new voice joined the conversation. Actually, it's neither. They all turned to see Professor Zixtal approaching, accompanied by 2 Academy security officers. Professor, Vexkin said, his tone suddenly deferential. We were just implementing the monitoring protocol authorized by the council. Were you? Zixtal clicked his mandibles skeptically. Strange, since I've just come from meeting with the council head about how exactly that monitoring should be conducted. We decided it would be handled by the xenobiology department, my department, not a student club with no expertise in neural mapping. Vexkin's compound eyes darted between the professor and the security officers. There must be some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Zixtal interrupted, is yours about what constitutes appropriate academic conduct. The equipment you're carrying isn't standard neural monitoring gear. It's deep scan technology designed for medical emergencies. Using it on a conscious subject without proper authorization would violate at least 3 Academy regulations. The security officers moved forward, positioning themselves between Vexkin's group and Alex. But the human's neural patterns are a security risk, Vexkin protested. The directive is being reviewed, Zixtal finished for him, along with several other outdated policies regarding interspecies interaction. Until that review is complete, Student Bennett will be monitored only during officially sanctioned telepathic events, using standard, non-invasive equipment and with full transparency about the data being collected. Vexkin's mandibles clicked rapidly in anger. This is exactly the problem with the integration initiative. Rules being bent, security concerns dismissed, all to accommodate a predator species. The only one posing a threat to Academy security right now is you, Student Vexkin, Zixtal said coldly. Your unauthorized attempt to use restricted medical equipment on another student could be grounds for disciplinary action. For a moment, it seemed like Vexkin might argue further. Then, with a final angry click of his mandibles, he signaled to his group. This isn't over, he said, looking directly at Alex. The Security Council review is next month. We'll see then who belongs at this academy. As Vexkin and his group departed, Alex turned to Professor Zixtal. Thank you, he said, though I'm a bit surprised to find you defending me. As I said earlier, I've done your species a disservice, the professor replied. Perhaps this is the beginning of making amends. He turned to the security officers. Please escort Student Bennett to his dormitory and ensure he's not disturbed again tonight. As the officers nodded and took up positions nearby, Zixtal addressed Alex once more. Rest well, Student Bennett. I suspect the coming weeks will be eventful. After the professor left, Alex turned to Devora. So much for keeping a low profile. Maybe it's time for a new approach anyway, she said. The Confederation needs to evolve beyond these outdated stereotypes, starting with the Academy. Alex looked at her thoughtfully. You're suggesting what, exactly? That I become the poster child for human integration? Not a poster child, Devora said. Just yourself, openly, honestly yourself. Before Alex could respond, his tablet chimed with an incoming message. He checked it, then let out a surprised laugh. What is it? Devora asked. Krillax. Apparently news travels fast. He says the whole academy is talking about the human revelation, and several students have approached him with questions since everyone knows we're roommates. Alex shook his head. He also says there's a betting pool on whether I can actually lift 4 times my body weight in an emergency. Devora's scales rippled with amusement. And? Can you? Guess they'll have to create an emergency to find out, Alex replied with a grin. One of the security officers cleared his throat politely. Student Bennett, we should proceed to your dormitory now. Alex nodded. Right. He turned back to Devora. I guess this is good night. For now, she agreed. But we should continue our conversation soon. Perhaps over a meal? I'm curious about this capsaicin obsession of yours. Despite everything that had happened, Alex felt a warmth that had nothing to do with adrenaline or evolutionary adaptations. I'd like that. As he walked away with his security escort, Alex couldn't help but reflect on the day's events. His carefully constructed anonymity was gone, replaced by a spotlight he'd never wanted. But maybe Devora was right. Maybe it was time for a different approach. After all, if there was one trait humans were universally acknowledged to possess, it was adaptability. The next few weeks were, as Professor Zixtel had predicted, eventful. News of a human student at the academy spread quickly, transforming Alex from an anonymous face in the crowd to something of a reluctant celebrity. Students who had barely acknowledged his existence before now watched him curiously in the hallways. Some approached with questions, others kept their distance, and a few, mostly those aligned with Vexkin's views, made their displeasure known through pointed comments or by ostentatiously avoiding areas where he was present. Professor Zixtal had made good on his offer, inviting Alex to collaborate on a revised human biology unit for the xenobiology curriculum. The result was a more nuanced presentation that acknowledged human physical capabilities without sensationalizing them, and that emphasized the diversity within the species, rather than presenting a monolithic, human nature. Alex had also taken to eating in the main cafeteria, rather than taking meals back to his dormitory. A small change, but a symbolic one. It was during one such lunch that Krillax slid onto the bench across from him, all 3 hearts visibly racing through his translucent chest. Have you seen the latest? His roommate asked without preamble, pushing a tablet across the table. Alex picked it up and found himself looking at the Academy news feed. The headline read, Security Council to review integration initiative next week. Decision could impact Academy's pilot program. They moved up the review, Alex said, scrolling through the article. It was supposed to be next month. Vexkin's group has been lobbying hard, Krillax said. They've gathered support from several conservative council members who were skeptical of the initiative from the beginning. Alex set down the tablet with a sigh. So this is it then. 3 years of work, and it all comes down to a council vote that's probably already decided. Not necessarily, said a familiar voice. Devora slid onto the bench beside Alex, her scales a determined blue. We've been organizing too. Over the past weeks, Alex and Devora had spent considerable time together, studying, sharing meals, and talking for hours about their respective worlds. What had begun as curiosity had evolved into something more, though neither had put a name to it yet. We? Alex asked. A group of students who support the integration initiative, not just for humans, but for all currently restricted species. Devora placed her own tablet on the table, displaying a list of names. We've gathered over 500 signatures supporting the continuation and expansion of the program. Alex scrolled through the list, surprised by the number and diversity of species represented. I had no idea there was this much support. Most students are more open-minded than Vexkin and his followers, Devora said. They just haven't had a reason to speak up until now. Unfortunately, Krillax interjected. Student opinions don't carry much weight with the Security Council. They're more concerned with the political implications back in their home systems, which is why we need to make this about more than politics. Devora said. We need to make it personal. Alex raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? A presentation to the council, Devora explained. Not just dry reports and statistics, but real experiences. Your experiences, Alex? Show them what the initiative has actually accomplished. You want me to stand in front of the Security Council and... what? Tell them my life story? I want you to show them that their fears are unfounded, that a human can integrate successfully into Confederation society without incident, that the stereotypes they've built their policies around don't hold up to real-world testing. Alex considered the idea. It was daunting, to say the least. The Security Council wasn't just some academic body. They were representatives of the most powerful governments in the Confederation. Their decisions shaped interstellar policy. Even if I agreed, he said slowly, there's no guarantee they'd listen. The Council agenda is set weeks in advance. You can't just show up and ask to speak. Actually, Krillax said, his skin flushing slightly with excitement, you can. There's a provision in the Council Charter for direct testimony from affected parties when reviewing integration policies. It's rarely used, but it exists. Alex looked between his roommate and Devora. You two have been planning this, haven't you? We've been exploring options, Devora corrected. This is just the one with the highest probability of success. According to what analysis? Mine, said a new voice. Alex turned to see Professor Zixtal approaching their table, mandibles set in a serious expression. May I join you? Alex nodded, and the professor settled onto a specially designed seating unit that accommodated his exoskeletal structure. I've been following the Council's deliberations through my academic contacts, Zixtal explained. The vote is closer than you might think. Several members are genuinely interested in the results of the pilot program, but they're being pressured by conservative factions back home. So my testimony could actually make a difference? Alex asked skeptically. Potentially, the professor said. Particularly if supported by empirical data from your time at the Academy. He gestured to a data crystal he'd placed on the table, which I happen to have compiled. Alex picked up the crystal, turning it in his hands. My academic records? And more. Behavioral assessments, social integration metrics, physiological adaptation data. All anonymized until now, of course. Together they tell a compelling story of successful integration. A story the Council needs to hear, Devora added. Alex looked around at the three of them, his roommate, his professor, and Devora. They'd all put themselves on the line for him, in different ways. Krillax had kept his secret for years. Zixtal had publicly changed his position on human integration, risking his academic reputation. And Devora had defended him to an angry crowd before she'd even known what he was. He owed them this much, at least. And maybe he owed it to himself, too. All right, he said finally. I'll do it. Devora's scales shifted to a bright, happy yellow. Excellent. Now we just need to prepare your presentation. The Council convenes in 3 days. 3 days? Alex groaned. No pressure or anything. Don't worry, Krillax said cheerfully, all three hearts pulsing with excitement. We'll help you. Between Devora's persuasive skills, Professor Zixtal's data, and my knowledge of Council protocols, we've got this covered. And what do I bring to this team effort? Alex asked wryly. Professor Zixtal clicked his mandibles in what Alex had come to recognize as his version of a smile. Why, Student Bennett, you bring the most important element of all, proof that the Confederation's fears about humans are unfounded. As they began planning his presentation, Alex couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the situation. He'd come to the Academy hoping to blend in, to be just another student. Instead, he was about to become the most visible human in Confederation space, advocating for his entire species. If someone had told him this would be the outcome when he'd volunteered for the program 3 years ago, he might have reconsidered. But now, looking at the determined faces of his allies, his friends, he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. The Security Council chamber in the Confederation Embassy complex was designed to project power and authority. Unlike the relatively egalitarian layout of the Academic Council chamber, here there was a clear hierarchy. The 7 council members sat on an elevated platform looking down on the speaker's podium. Behind them, massive view screens displayed the Confederation emblem, a stylized representation of diverse star systems united in harmony. Alex stood at the podium, trying to control his breathing. The chamber was filled with diplomats, security officials, and a small contingent of Academy representatives, including Professor Zixtal, Devora, and Krillax. Vexcan and several of his supporters were also present, seated in a section reserved for opposition testimony. Student Alexander Bennett intoned the council chair, a dignified Alterian whose crystalline structure glowed with internal light. You have requested the opportunity to address this council regarding the Integration Initiative, specifically as it pertains to human participation in Confederation institutions. You may proceed. Alex took a deep breath. They had rehearsed this, but standing here now, facing the beings who held the future of human Confederation relations in their hands, or equivalent appendages, He felt a momentary panic. Then he caught Devora's eye. Her scales were a steady, confident blue. She gave him a slight nod. "Honorable council members," Alex began, his voice stronger than he expected. "3 years ago, I became the first human to attend the Galactic Confederation Academy as part of the Integration Initiative. Today, I stand before you as living proof that this initiative can succeed, that humans and Confederation species can coexist and collaborate for mutual benefit." He tapped the console, bringing up a series of data visualizations on the view screens. "These charts represent my academic performance, social integration metrics, and physiological adaptation data over my time at the Academy. As you can see, there have been 0 security incidents, no physical altercations, and consistently positive evaluations from professors and peers alike." Alex paused, looking directly at each council member. "But these are just numbers. They don't tell the whole story. The real success of the initiative isn't measured in data points. It's measured in relationships formed, perspectives broadened, and stereotypes overcome." He gestured to where Krillax and Devora sat. "My roommate, Aventari, was initially terrified when he learned he'd be living with a human. Now we're close friends. My professors, who once taught that humans were dangerous predators, now work with me to create more accurate curriculum materials. And many of my fellow students who only knew humans from sensationalized xenobiology lectures have discovered that we're not so different after all." The council members were listening attentively, though their expressions, for those species that had recognizable expressions, remained neutral. "I understand the concerns that led to the classification of humans as a restricted species," Alex continued. "Our evolutionary history as persistence predators, our physiological adaptations for survival in harsh environments, our capacity for aggression when threatened, these are real traits that evolved for good reasons on our homeworld." He tapped the console again, bringing up images of Earth. Not the violent, storm-racked Deathworld of xenobiology textbooks, but scenes of natural beauty, thriving cities, and humans engaged in peaceful pursuits. "But we are more than the sum of our evolutionary traits. Like all sentient species, we've transcended our biological origins. We've built civilizations based on cooperation, not competition. We've channeled our persistence into scientific discovery, artistic creation, and the exploration of space. And yes, we still have the capacity for aggression, but so does every species when its survival is threatened." Alex paused, letting his words sink in. "The question before this council isn't whether humans have physical capabilities that could, hypothetically, pose a danger. The question is whether, given the opportunity, humans can peacefully integrate into Confederation society, whether we can control those capabilities and direct them toward constructive ends." He gestured to the data still displayed on the screens. 3 years of evidence suggests the answer is yes. Not just for me, but for the dozens of human diplomats, researchers, and exchange students who have worked within Confederation space since first contact. There have been challenges, certainly, and cultural misunderstandings on both sides. But there has not been a single incident of human aggression against a Confederation citizen. A murmur ran through the chamber. Alex knew he was making an impact, but the hardest part was yet to come. "Honorable council members, I understand that caution is warranted when dealing with an unfamiliar species. But the current restrictions, limiting human movement, requiring constant monitoring, treating us as inherently dangerous, aren't just unnecessary based on the evidence. They actively hinder the kind of meaningful interaction that builds trust and understanding." He leaned forward slightly, his voice earnest. "I'm not asking for the complete removal of all safeguards. I'm asking for a policy based on actual observed behavior rather than theoretical risk. I'm asking for the opportunity for more humans to experience what I have, the incredible diversity of the Confederation, the exchange of knowledge and culture, the formation of friendships across species boundaries." Alex straightened, his voice growing stronger. "Humans have a saying. Fear is often greater than the danger that causes it. The Confederation has feared humans based on our physical capabilities and evolutionary history. But as you've seen, the actual danger we pose is minimal when we're treated as equals rather than threats." He tapped the console one final time, bringing up the petition Devora had organized. Over 500 Academy students and faculty have signed this statement supporting the continuation and expansion of the Integration Initiative. They've lived and worked alongside a human for 3 years, and their conclusion is clear. We belong here, as partners in the great galactic community you've built. Alex paused, making eye contact with each council member one last time. The decision you make today isn't just about humans. It's about what kind of confederation you want to be. One that judges species based on their worst theoretical potential, or one that gives them the chance to demonstrate their best actual behavior. I hope you'll choose the latter. Thank you. As Alex stepped back from the podium, the chamber remained silent for a moment. Then a ripple of conversation spread through the audience. The council chair's crystalline structure pulsed with internal light, the Alterian equivalent of clearing one's throat. Thank you, Student Bennett. Your testimony has been most informative. The chair turned to the rest of the council. Are there questions for the speaker? A Dravoxian council member whose gas-filled body was contained within an ornate environmental suit spoke first. Student Bennett, your academic record is indeed impressive. But surely you must acknowledge that one individual's behavior cannot be extrapolated to an entire species. Humans have a documented history of internal conflict that exceeds most Confederation species. Alex nodded. You're right that I can't speak for all humans, just as no individual can represent their entire species. As for our history of conflict, yes, we've fought wars. We've made terrible mistakes, but we've also learned from them. Our capacity for self-reflection and change is as much a part of our nature as our capacity for aggression. Another council member, a neural web collective that manifested as a shimmering cloud of light, pulsed in a pattern that indicated a question. The data suggests successful integration in an academic setting, but the academy is a controlled environment with clear rules and expectations. How would humans react to the less structured reality of general Confederation society? That's a fair concern, Alex acknowledged. But it's worth noting that the integration initiative includes humans in diplomatic corps, research stations, and cultural exchange programs, all with similarly positive results. Furthermore, the Academy actually presents unique challenges due to the constant proximity to diverse species, varying environmental conditions, and high-stress academic demands. If integration can succeed there, it can succeed anywhere. The questions continued, ranging from technical inquiries about human physiology to philosophical discussions about cultural compatibility. Alex answered each as honestly as he could, neither downplaying legitimate concerns nor accepting unfair characterizations. Finally, the council chair indicated that the questioning period was complete. The council will now hear opposition testimony. Student Vexkin of the Academy Xenoneurology Club has requested time to speak. Alex returned to his seat as Vexkin took the podium, his mandibles set in a determined position. Honorable council members, the Threkkie began. Student Bennett has presented an interesting perspective, but I must urge caution against making policy decisions based on emotional appeals rather than scientific fact. Vexkin tapped the console, bringing up his own set of visuals, primarily anatomical diagrams of human musculature and neural structures. The human physique is designed for hunting and killing, he said bluntly. Their muscles generate force disproportionate to their size. Their skeletal structure can withstand impacts that would shatter most species' bones. Their neural pathways prioritize threat response over rational thought in crisis situations. He clicked his mandibles for emphasis. Student Bennett speaks of judging based on actual behavior rather than theoretical risk. But this ignores a fundamental reality. The risk posed by humans is not theoretical, it is built into their very biology. Vexkin paced slightly, his multiple limbs moving in precise patterns. Consider this analogy. Would you allow a carnivorous predator into your living space simply because it had not yet attacked? Would you remove the safety protocols from a high-energy reactor because it had not yet melted down? Of course not. You would maintain appropriate safeguards because the potential for harm, however unlikely at any given moment, remains. He turned to face the council directly. The integration initiative was implemented with strict protocols precisely because the Confederation recognized the unique risks posed by Deathworld species. Relaxing those protocols based on 3 years of supervised behavior in a controlled environment would be profoundly irresponsible. Vexcan's presentation continued in this vein, methodically cataloging the various ways in which human biology differed from Confederation norms and the potential risks those differences presented. His arguments were technically accurate but stripped of context, focusing exclusively on physical capabilities without acknowledging the cognitive and cultural factors that governed their use. As Vexkin concluded, Alex felt a growing sense of frustration. The Threkkie had painted a picture of humans as walking weapons, as though the capacity for violence was the sum total of their nature. The council chair thanked Vexkin for his testimony, then addressed the chamber. The council will now deliberate. All parties are asked to remain present, as we may have additional questions. The 7 council members activated privacy fields around their platform, allowing them to discuss without being overheard. The rest of the chamber broke into murmured conversations. Devora slid into the seat beside Alex. "You were amazing," she said, her scales a warm, admiring gold. "Thanks," Alex replied. But Vexkin made some points that will be hard to counter. He wasn't wrong about human physiology. No, but he was wrong about what it means, Devora said firmly. Biology isn't destiny, especially for sentient species. Let's hope the Council sees it that way. The deliberation continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only about 30 minutes. Finally, the privacy fields deactivated, and the Council chair called for attention. The Council has reached a preliminary decision, the Alterian announced. However, before we formalize this decision, we have one final question for Student Bennett. Alex stood. Yes, Council Chair? Throughout these proceedings, we have discussed human capabilities in abstract terms. Student Vexken has emphasized your physical adaptations for survival and aggression. You have emphasized your capacity for self-control and integration. The chair's crystalline structure pulsed thoughtfully. Perhaps a practical demonstration would be informative. Are you willing to undergo a test of sorts? Alex hesitated. What kind of test? Nothing invasive, the chair assured him. Simply a scenario to observe how you, as a representative human, respond to certain stimuli. Alex glanced at Professor Zixtal, who gave a slight nod. I'm willing, Alex said. Though I should note that, as I mentioned earlier, no individual can perfectly represent their entire species. Understood, the chair said. Please approach the center of the chamber. As Alex moved to the indicated position, the chamber's environmental controls activated. The temperature dropped noticeably, and the lighting dimmed. Humans evolved in variable conditions, the chair explained to the chamber at large. Let us see how Student Bennett adapts to moderate environmental stress. Alex suppressed a smile. If they thought a little cold was stress, they really didn't understand humans at all. He stood calmly as the temperature continued to drop, eventually reaching what he estimated was about 5°C. Chilly, but nothing a human from any temperate region of Earth wouldn't experience regularly. After several minutes, the chair spoke again. Your vital signs remain stable, Student Bennett. Impressive adaptation. The temperature began to normalize, but as it did, a new element was introduced. A low-frequency sound began to pulse through the chamber, the kind of deep, resonant tone that triggers instinctive alertness in many predator species. Alex recognized what they were doing. They were testing his predator responses, seeing if he would become aggressive or agitated under conditions that might trigger evolutionary reflexes. He took a deep breath and deliberately relaxed his posture, keeping his hands open at his sides in what he hoped was a universal signal of non-aggression. The sound continued for several minutes, gradually increasing in intensity. Alex maintained his calm demeanor, though he could feel his heart rate increasing slightly, a normal physiological response to the stimulus. Finally, the sound ceased. The chamber had been utterly silent otherwise, everyone watching his reactions with intense interest. Your control is notable, the chair observed. Now, for the final element of our test. Without warning, a holographic projection appeared directly in front of Alex. A snarling predator from Earth, a tiger, lunging directly at him with startling realism. Alex's body reacted before his mind could intervene. A surge of adrenaline, muscles tensing, heartbeats spiking. But instead of lashing out or fleeing, he held his position, forcing his breathing to remain steady as he reminded himself it was just a hologram. The projection vanished, and the chamber was silent again. Most interesting, the chair said. Your physiological monitors indicate a classic fight-or-flight response. Increased heart rate, adrenaline surge, muscle tension. Yet you neither attacked the perceived threat nor attempted to escape it. You controlled your instinctive reaction. Alex nodded, still calming his racing heart. That's what sentience means, doesn't it? The ability to override instinct with rational thought. Indeed. The chair turned to address the full council again. I believe we have seen what we needed to see. The council will now render its decision regarding the integration initiative. After a brief conference, the chair spoke again. Based on the evidence presented, including Student Bennett's testimony, the data from the Academy, and our direct observations, this council has decided the following. The chamber was utterly silent as everyone awaited the verdict. The integration initiative will continue, with certain modifications. The classification of humans as a Class 12 restricted species will be maintained for the present, but the practical implementations of that classification will be revised. The chair outlined the specifics. First, the human presence at the Academy will be expanded from a single student to a formal exchange program, with up to 20 human students admitted per academic cycle. Second, human movement within Confederation space will no longer require continuous monitoring, though standard security protocols applicable to all non-member species will remain in effect. Third, a joint Human Confederation research team will be established to conduct a comprehensive review of human biology, psychology, and culture, with the goal of developing a more nuanced understanding than currently exists in Confederation databases. Finally, this council recognizes that the integration of any new species requires adjustment on both sides. Therefore, a cultural liaison office will be established to facilitate mutual understanding and address concerns as they arise. The chair's crystalline structure pulsed with finality. These measures represent a balanced approach, maintaining prudent safeguards while creating opportunities for meaningful interaction and reassessment. The Council believes this decision honors both the legitimate security concerns raised by student Vexken and the compelling evidence of successful integration presented by student Bennett. Alex could hardly believe what he was hearing. It wasn't everything he'd hoped for. Humans were still technically classified as restricted, but it was a massive step forward. The expansion of the Academy program alone would transform human Confederation relations. Around the chamber, reactions were mixed. Professor Zextal and Krillax looked pleased. Devora's scales were shifting through happy patterns of yellow and gold. Vexken and his supporters seemed disappointed but not outraged. The council had acknowledged their concerns even while moving in a different direction. Student Bennett, the chair addressed him directly. As the first human to complete the Academy program under the initiative, you have played a significant role in shaping this decision. The Council would like to offer you a position as the inaugural human representative on the Cultural Liaison Team, should you accept. Alex was momentarily speechless. I would be honored, Council Chair. Excellent. The details will be provided following your graduation. The chair's crystalline structure pulsed once more. This council is adjourned. As the chamber began to clear, Alex found himself surrounded by his supporters. Professor Zixtal's mandibles were clicking rapidly in excitement. Krillax's 3 hearts were visible pounding through his translucent chest, and Devora's scales were a dazzling kaleidoscope of celebratory colors. You did it! Krillax exclaimed, all 6 limbs gesticulating wildly. You actually convinced the Security Council to reconsider their position. We did it, Alex corrected, looking at each of them in turn. I couldn't have done this without any of you. Professor Zixtal inclined his head slightly. You give us too much credit, Student Bennett. The evidence spoke for itself. You merely presented it effectively, and handled that ridiculous test with impressive composure, Devora added, though I nearly died of anxiety when they projected that predator at you. What was that creature? A tiger, Alex explained. Apex predator from Earth. They obviously did their homework on what might trigger a fear response in humans. Yet you controlled it, the professor observed. Most impressive, Alex shrugged. Anyone would have done the same in my position. No, Devora said firmly, her scales settling into a serious blue. Most species would have either attacked or fled. Your ability to recognize the hologram as non-threatening despite your instinctive reaction is exactly what the Council needed to see, that humans can override their evolutionary programming with conscious thought. As they made their way out of the chamber, Alex noticed Vexken and his supporters huddled in conversation nearby. The Threkkie noticed him looking and broke away from his group, approaching with mandibles set in a neutral position. Bennett, Vexken said stiffly, it seems congratulations are in order. Alex studied him carefully, unsure if this was genuine or sarcasm. Thank you, though I recognize the Council tried to address concerns from all perspectives. Vexken clicked his mandibles in what might have been reluctant agreement. They did, and while I maintain my position regarding the potential risks, I acknowledge that your individual behavior has been exemplary. It wasn't exactly a warm endorsement, but coming from Vexken, it was practically an embrace. I appreciate that, Alex said, and I understand your concerns. They're not irrational, given the limited information about humans in Confederation databases. Maybe the joint research team will help develop a more complete picture. Perhaps. Vexken seemed to hesitate, then added, my opposition was never personal, Bennett. It was based on biological and security considerations. I know, Alex replied, and honestly, some of your points were valid. Humans do have physical capabilities that could be dangerous if misused. The difference is that I believe the risk is manageable through the same social and legal frameworks that govern all sentient interactions. Vexken's compound eyes studied him for a moment. Time will tell, he said finally. Good day, Bennett. As the Threkkie departed, Devora moved to Alex's side. That was unexpected. People can surprise you, Alex said. Even uptight, xenophobic Threkkie. Speaking of surprises, Krillax interjected, all 3 hearts still beating visibly faster than normal. We should celebrate. This calls for a proper Academy commemoration. Professor Zixtal clicked his mandibles in amusement. I believe I'll leave the proper Academy commemoration to you young beings. I have curriculum revisions to begin. He extended a limb toward Alex. Congratulations again, Student Bennett. Your presentation was most illuminating. After the professor departed, Krillax turned to Alex and Devora, practically vibrating with excitement. So, celebration? The entire academy will be talking about this. Alex groaned. Please tell me you haven't already arranged something. Not specifically for this, Krillax admitted. But there's a multi-species gathering at the Harmony Hall tonight. Perfect timing. Another telepathic resonance exercise? Alex asked skeptically. No, just a social gathering. Music, refreshments, conversation, normal people things. Devora's scales rippled with amusement. Normal for which species exactly? All of them. That's the point! It's called convergence for a reason. Alex and Devora exchanged glances. After the intensity of the council hearing, a relaxed social evening actually sounded appealing. All right, Alex said. But if they start doing that weird humming thing again, I'm out. Agreed, Devora said, her scales shifting to a warm amber. And Alex, you might want to prepare yourself. After today, you're not going to be able to blend into the background anymore. The Harmony Hall was indeed packed with students from across the academy, the environmental systems working overtime to accommodate the diverse biological needs of dozens of different species. Music filled the air, a complex, multi-layered composition designed to include frequencies and rhythms appealing to various auditory systems. As Devora had predicted, Alex's entrance caused a noticeable ripple of attention. Conversations paused, sensory appendages turned in his direction, and the general buzz of the room briefly quieted before resuming at a higher volume. Told you, Devora murmured, her scales displaying a mixture of amusement and pride. Great, Alex muttered. Just what I always wanted, to be the center of attention in a room full of aliens. They're curious, Krillax said, and impressed. The news about the council decision is all over the academy networks. A group of students approached, a diverse mix of species, including a hovering vapori, a silicon-based crystalline, and several others Alex recognized from his classes. Is it true? Asked the vapori, releasing puffs of aromatic compounds that translated roughly to excitement. The Security Council is expanding the human presence at the academy? Alex nodded. Up to 20 students per cycle, starting next term. And you're going to be on the cultural liaison team? Asked the crystalline, light refracting through their faceted body in patterns of interest. Apparently so, Alex confirmed, though I'm still not entirely sure what that entails. It means you'll be helping shape Confederation policy on human integration, said another student, a Muriskian whose tentacles were gesticulating in academic enthusiasm. The liaison teams have significant influence on practical implementation of council decisions. More students joined the group, questions coming from all directions. What was Earth really like? How had Alex adapted to the Academy's alien environment? Was it true humans could regulate their body temperature through sweating? Did all humans possess the same physical capabilities? Or was there significant variation within the species? Alex answered as best he could, surprised by the genuine interest. These weren't the fearful or sensationalized questions he'd anticipated. These students wanted to understand, to move beyond the stereotypes presented in xenobiology classes. As the evening progressed, Alex found himself relaxing, even enjoying the attention. Devora remained by his side, her scales occasionally brushing against his arm in what he'd come to recognize as a gesture of support. During a brief lull in the conversation, Alex turned to her. You were right. This is not what I expected. The academy is full of scientists and scholars, she said. Curiosity tends to overcome fear, given the opportunity. Still, this is a big change from 3 weeks ago when most students didn't even notice me. Devora's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Blending in allowed you to complete the program without incident, but standing out is what will actually change perceptions. Ironic, considering I spent 3 years trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. Sometimes the universe has different plans for us than we have for ourselves. As the gathering continued, Alex noticed something remarkable happening. The initial flood of questions about humans was gradually giving way to more general conversation. Students were discussing upcoming exams, sharing academic interests, debating theoretical concepts, and including him naturally in these exchanges. Not as the human, but simply as another academy student. It was, in its way, exactly what the Integration Initiative had been designed to achieve, the normalization of human presence within Confederation society. Later, as the gathering began to wind down, Alex found himself standing near one of the dome's transparent sections, looking out at the twin moons of the Academy world. Devora joined him, her scales a calm, content blue with hints of golden warmth. Thinking deep thoughts? She asked. Just reflecting on how much has changed in such a short time, he replied. 3 weeks ago, I was just another anonymous student trying to get through my final term. Now I'm about to become a cultural ambassador for my entire species. Having second thoughts? Alex considered the question. Not exactly. More like wondering if I'm the right person for this role. There are humans with more diplomatic experience, more knowledge of interspecies relations, but none with 3 years of living successfully within Confederation society, Devora pointed out. You've done what no other human has. Integrated fully into Academy life. Formed relationships across species boundaries. Proven that humans can adapt to our environments and customs just as we can adapt to yours. She placed a hand on his arm, her scales shifting to a deeper blue with golden patterns. A color combination he'd never seen before. Besides, she continued, you won't be doing it alone. The liaison team will include representatives from multiple species. And her scales flickered with hints of purple. I've requested assignment to the team as well. Alex turned to her, surprised. You have? But what about your xenobiology research? I thought you were planning to join the Silurian science expedition after graduation. Plans change, she said simply. The expedition will always be there. What's happening now with the initiative, this is historic. I want to be part of it. Her scales rippled briefly with that same purple hue. And I want to continue the research we've started. Research? Alex raised an eyebrow. On interspecies cultural adaptation, Devora clarified, though her scales suggested there might be more to it than academic interest. We've barely scratched the surface of understanding how different species can learn from each other, adapt to each other's preferences and needs. Is that what we've been doing? Alex asked, a smile playing at his lips. Among other things, Devora admitted, her scales now definitely displaying the Silurian equivalent of a blush. The moment was interrupted by Krillax, who approached with his typical lack of subtlety, all 3 hearts visibly racing through his translucent chest. There you are, he exclaimed. You won't believe what just happened. The Academy director announced they're creating a new course for next term, Comparative Xenobiology, Deathworld Adaptations and Integration. And guess who they want to co-teach it? Professor Zixtal? Alex guessed. You, Krillax said triumphantly. Well, you and Professor Zixtal. But still, a human teaching xenobiology. Can you imagine? Alex laughed. A month ago? Absolutely not. Now? He glanced at Devora, whose scales were shimmering with delight. Now I'm starting to think anything's possible. As they made their way out of the Harmony Hall, other students called out congratulations or asked quick questions. Alex answered them easily, no longer uncomfortable with the attention. This was his new reality. Not hiding in the shadows, but standing in the light as a representative of his species. It wasn't what he'd expected when he'd volunteered for the Integration Initiative 3 years ago. It wasn't even what he'd expected when he'd walked into Professor Zixtal's xenobiology class and heard humans described as Deathworld monsters. But as he walked through the Academy hallways with Devora's scales occasionally brushing against his arm and Krillax enthusiastically outlining plans for the coming term, Alex realized it was exactly where he was meant to be. The Confederation had feared humans based on their evolutionary history and physical capabilities. They'd seen the potential for danger and violence inherent in a species adapted to a harsh, unforgiving world. What they were only now beginning to understand was that those same adaptations, the persistence, the problem-solving, the ability to thrive in adverse conditions, could be powerful forces for good when channeled properly. Humans weren't just Deathworld monsters. They were Deathworld survivors, with all the resilience and determination that implied. And in a galaxy full of diverse species, each with their own unique strengths and limitations, perhaps that was exactly what was needed. Not despite their differences, but because of them. 6 months later, Alex stood in the Academy's main auditorium, watching as the first expanded class of human students arrived. 20 young men and women, eyes wide with the same wonder he'd felt 3 years earlier, taking in the incredible diversity of species around them. Beside him, Devora's scales shimmered with excitement, the now familiar pattern of blue and gold that she displayed when particularly happy. On his other side, Professor Zixtal clicked his mandibles in what Alex had come to recognize as academic satisfaction. They seem small, the professor observed. Are you certain they're fully mature specimens? Alex suppressed a smile. Yes, Professor. Humans come in various sizes. Remember morphological diversity within species? Ah, yes, the concept we emphasized in our curriculum revisions. Zixtal's compound eyes studied the new arrivals with professional interest. Fascinating. The phenotypic variation is more pronounced than I anticipated. Just wait until you start teaching them, Alex said. The psychological and cultural variation is even more remarkable. As the orientation session began, Alex thought about how much had changed. The Security Council's decision had opened doors not just at the Academy, but throughout Confederation space. Human diplomatic missions had expanded, scientific exchanges had increased, and the Joint Research Team was making significant progress in updating the Confederation's databases with more accurate information about Earth and its inhabitants. There had been challenges, of course. Cultural misunderstandings, occasional friction, the persistent skepticism of conservatives like Vexkin, who continued to advocate for stricter security protocols. But overall, the integration was proceeding more smoothly than even the initiative's strongest supporters had predicted. "They're going to change things," Devora said quietly, watching the new students. "Just like you did." "We all changed things," Alex corrected. "It wasn't just me." "But it started with you," she insisted, her scales rippling with emphasis. One human in the back row of a xenobiology class, listening to a lecture about Deathworld monsters while being one himself. If that isn't the beginning of a great story, I don't know what is. Alex smiled. "When you put it that way, it does sound pretty dramatic." "The best stories usually are," Devora said, her scales brushing against his hand in what had become a familiar gesture of affection. "And I have a feeling this one is just getting started." As they watched the new students begin their academy journey, Alex reflected on his own path, from anxious newcomer trying desperately to blend in, to recognized representative of his species. It wasn't a role he'd sought, but it was one he'd grown into, with the help of friends who saw beyond stereotypes to the person beneath. And maybe that was the real lesson of the integration initiative. Not that humans could adapt to Confederation society, though they certainly could. Not that Confederation species could overcome their fears of Deathworld monsters, though they were learning to. The real lesson was simpler and more profound. That connection was possible across even the widest biological and cultural divides, if both sides were willing to try. That understanding could replace fear, that curiosity could overcome prejudice, that friendship could transcend difference. As Professor Zixtal moved forward to welcome the new students, his lecture mode already engaging, Alex heard him begin. "Welcome, esteemed scholars, to the Galactic Confederation Academy. Today marks the beginning of an exciting new chapter in interspecies cooperation and understanding." Devora leaned closer, her scales now a mischievous yellow. 10 credit says he makes it at least 5 minutes before mentioning persistence predators or adrenaline responses. "No bet," Alex laughed. "Some things never change." But as he watched the professor gesturing enthusiastically to the attentive new students, human and non-human alike, Alex knew that wasn't entirely true. Things did change. Sometimes slowly, sometimes dramatically, but they changed. 3 years ago, a professor had taught a class about Deathworld monsters, unaware that one was sitting in the room. Today, that same professor was welcoming those monsters as valued additions to the Academy community. It wasn't a perfect solution. It wasn't the end of all misunderstandings or prejudices. But it was progress. The kind of progress that happened one relationship, one conversation, one connection at a time. And in a universe as vast and diverse as theirs, that was no small achievement. The end.